I'm Nick Forster. You are listening to eTown. And we've got more music from Daryl Scott coming up in a little while. And wonderful singer from Amsterdam is here. Jana Mila is here with a couple of guys from her band. That's all coming up. Right now, I mentioned earlier that Allison Neswood is here. She grew up in the Navajo Nation, and unlike the vast majority of her school classmates, she not only went to college, but she went to Yale undergrad and Columbia Law School, and she now works with the Native American Rights Fund to advocate and fight to improve the lives of Native Americans in a variety of ways. She's tireless in her efforts, particularly around healthcare and more recently, voting rights. So we all owe a debt to those who were here first. She's doing something about it. Proud of her. Please welcome to eTown, Allison Neswood. Welcome, Allison. Was that an accurate build-up? My intro, was it okay?
I think it was great. Thank you so much for the nice introduction.
Do you mind if we start with a little background? I mentioned that you grew up in the Navajo Nation. Maybe you could help people understand what that means.
Sure. My reservation is in the Southwest, so largely in Arizona, some in New Mexico, and then also in southern Utah. It's a really vibrant land. Lots of mesas, red earth, sagebrush, and it came with a lot of challenges, poverty, issues that go along with poverty, but also, when I think about the reservation in my life there as a kid, it's a time and a place that I still really yearn for.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of siblings?
I have two younger brothers.
Okay. Were they annoying younger brothers?
No,
Not
actually.
too bad, no.
No, they were much younger than I am.
Oh, okay.
My first brother was born when I was 13,
okay.
And he was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think I was lonely, and he gave me just a lot of life, and I loved taking care of him. And
that's cool. And I mentioned that you were not typical in that you, among your classmates, you went on to college, you went to get a really solid education. And I imagine that someone like you with your background, going to Ivy League schools and coming out with a law degree, you must have been heavily recruited by the biggest law firms in the country and offered big, giant paychecks and stuff like that, I suspect.
I felt coming out of school like I had some good opportunities, and I was really grateful for what that afforded.
But you decided to focus your time and energies with the Native American Rights Fund and really give back in ways that made sense to you.
The reason I went to law school was to give back to my community.
Yeah.
It was the right fit. I did, public interest policy work before starting at NARF, and then was really grateful to be able to make the switch to work more directly for Native people and Native rights.
And let's just mention NARF, Native American Rights Fund, is a nonprofit. It's basically a law firm that works on behalf of Native American issues. And it's been around a while, right?
Yeah, NARF was founded in 1970, and it really was founded, the founders, including John Echohawk, who's still our executive director, was a young lawyer and sort of looking at the fact that there are these rights that Native people had, but when he looked around at his community, those rights weren't reflected. And around that time, it was the civil rights movement, and they saw that like the African American community had lawyers, like at the NAACP, and they wanted to create NARF to be sort of the same thing for Native people.
Yeah, and you found when you entered that arena and you started advocating, you started on healthcare and voting rights. So those are the kind of main issues you focused on, or?
Well, I did healthcare before NARF.
Oh, before NARF, okay.
So that was with the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, state-level nonprofit here, or based in Denver, and that does policy work there. And then when I moved to NARF is when I really started focusing on Native American voting rights.
Yeah, and so Native American voting rights, I think it's important for people to understand, those voting rights didn't exist until middle of the 20th century, right?
Yeah, actually... 100 years ago this month, Congress declared that Native Americans were citizens with the Indian Citizenship Act. But, decades after that, states were still saying that Native Americans were incompetent to vote, or, they could only vote if they completely disclaimed their tribal identity. And so the last state laws that provided, those type of exclusions lasted all the way into the 1940s and 1950s. And then even after that, states used literacy tests and other mechanisms like that to continue to deny people the right to vote. So Native people really didn't have a meaningful way to enforce their voting rights until the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965 and amendments were passed in 1975. So a lot of our, seniors in our community remember the time when they were pushed away and excluded.
And it's happening again, as I understand it, in Arizona, which is one of the homes of the alleged voter fraud, that they are trying to remove ballot boxes and take them to access to voting away from particularly Native people.
Yeah, we see these kinds of lawsuits across the country, but in Arizona, there's a lawsuit to invalidate the use of ballot boxes. Similar lawsuits try to end mail voting or early voting or same-day registration, and all of these kinds of policies are particularly important for communities that face huge voting barriers, particularly Native Americans, and so we really see these as suppression tactics to continue to prevent Native people access to the ballot.
Yeah. I think there is something called automatic voter registration, right? That happens. Does it happen when you register for your car or get your license or stuff like that?
Yeah, that's the most well-known example of AVR. Yeah.
And AVR, and is that something that's available to Native populations now?
It's available to everybody who goes in and gets their driver's license in some states, but you'll see that, with lesser access to vehicles on reservations or, MBDs being located very far away from tribal communities, that there's sort of less access to licenses and less access, again, to that AVR process.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it's impressive that there is an organization like NARF. It's impressive that you chose to work there and focus on these issues of basically helping Native populations not continue to be disenfranchised and denied their access to participate in democracy. Yeah. So it's a big job. It's a big struggle. It's ongoing. And that doesn't even talk about socioeconomic issues and education issues and poverty issues and drug abuse and other things, because these are, in many ways, issues that we've got some responsibility for.
Yeah. And that's really why NARF does voting rights work for Native Americans, is because, as citizens, as Americans, our power partially comes from our ability to vote and to hold our elected leaders accountable. And Native Americans deserve that, right? Elected leaders are affecting our rights and our well-being every day in our communities, whether we live on reservation or off. And so we deserve to have a say. We deserve representation that understands us to be their constituents, and that understands our needs and our priorities and values. And so that's really why NARF focuses on voting rights, even with all our other priorities around tribal sovereignty and water rights and land rights and all of the other things that we do in partnership with tribal nations. Yeah, and voting rights are something that's something that everyone needs to be vigilant about anyway. There are plenty of communities where there are efforts to disenfranchise voters. Oh yeah, especially in this moment. Where our voting rights advocates are so important and they're working so hard, and it's really an honor to be a part of it. Well, all the things we talk about today with you, it's kind of a bummer. It's kind of like a serious subject. It's not exactly the most entertaining thing we could talk about, but it's important. And it's important that to me, people like you, young people who are educated and passionate, working on behalf of the greater good for these larger communities. And if people want to learn more, what's the easiest way to figure out? Yeah, NARF broadly, just narf.org. For our voting rights work, vote.narf.org. And you can go on there, you can donate to NARF. You can also get involved in the work, support policy initiatives. And one thing, that I really took away from the policy work I did prior to NARF is how important it is to do policy change work in partnership with our communities, in partnership with people who are facing oppression. And so, getting involved is really the antidote to that sadness or that hard the hard feelings that come up around this is building that community with whom you're changing the world.
Right.
That's what community is. And so, get involved, and that will, I promise you, help you feel better about all of the sad things that you hear about,
Yeah.
I think.
I also want to remind our listeners that Native American populations are everywhere. It's not just out here in the wild western states. There are opportunities to make an impact, make a difference, and advocate on behalf of Native populations wherever you are in the country.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Over 500 federally recognized tribes, even more who aren't federally recognized, from the East Coast to the West Coast, Canada to Mexico.
Yeah.
This is Native land that we're all living on, and there are Native people everywhere, and on reservation, off reservation, and so a lot of opportunity to get involved.
Is that something NARF can help with? Like if I were to go to the NARF website and say I live in, Connecticut, is there an opportunity for me to help in my neighborhood? Is there any kind of central database like that?
If you reach out to the information that you'll find on the website and just want to say you want to get involved here, somebody will reach out.
Okay.
There's not going to be a specific idea, I don't think, on the website, but somebody will reach out and let you know how you can get
I think
involved.
your point is really well taken. If you want to feel better about all this stuff, just do something.
Yeah.
Get involved, make a difference.
Yeah.
Do it right where you are. Do it in your community. Cool. Well, Allison, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for the work you're doing. Congratulations. Good luck. I know it's a struggle, but I know you're going to be good at it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Allison Neswood from the Native American Rights Fund, from NARF. You can find more at narf.org.